I never thought I'd be telling this story, but sometimes life throws you into a mess so chaotic, it almost feels scripted. Except this one, it's all real. My name's Kyle. I'm 24 now, but this all started when I was just a teenager fresh out of high school living with my mom. She had just ended a 25-year-long marriage to my dad. And trust me, it wasn't a clean break. Dad wasn't the best man, controlling, manipulative, cold. It took my mom years to finally walk away. When she did, she was exhausted, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. I moved back in with her after the divorce. So did my younger brother and older sister. We were all trying to rebuild together. Then came Chris. Chris wasn't what you'd call the perfect guy. Mom met him through her job. She worked as a correctional officer at the county jail. And Chris was a former inmate. Yeah, you heard that right. A guy with a DUI on his record. A huge red flag. But Mom was lonely, hurting, and searching for comfort. And he made her laugh. So I bit my tongue. If he made her happy, I could deal with it. Chris moved in. And weirdly enough, he wasn't terrible at first. He liked video games, so did I. We'd spend hours playing together, trading jokes, arguing over controllers. For a while, it was almost normal. We became this strange little patchwork family. Mom, Chris, my siblings, and me sharing dinners, weekends, birthdays. But that all changed in 2017. Chris had regular check-ins at the courthouse because of his DUI. He said it was routine. No big deal. So one day, like usual, he left for his check-in. But he didn't come back. No texts, no calls, just silence. We waited thinking maybe something had come up. Then, hours later, the phone rang. Mom answered it. Hey, I'm in Texas. What? Apparently, when Chris showed up at court that day, the FBI was waiting. No warning, no heads up, just boom, arrested. Turns out Chris's family in Texas was tied up in a whole web of drug and gang-related crimes. He had been with them once during a drug drop-off just sitting in a car. But that was enough. He was implicated. The charges were heavy. So he did what a lot of people in his situation do. He cut a deal. Chris agreed to testify against some of his family members in exchange for a shorter sentence and the chance to stay out of prison until trial. They let him relocate to Texas. We were stunned. My mom was shattered. She had trusted him, built a life around him, let him into her home, her heart, our family. Now he was just gone, pulled away into something dark and criminal. But that wasn't the end. Not for Mom. They kept in touch. He called her often, said he missed her, said he loved her. And slowly she forgave him. She believed him. Over long-distance phone calls and late-night letters, they started planning a future together. He said once his case was over, he'd come home. They'd get married, start fresh. And for some reason, Mom believed him. Eventually, Chris returned. And somehow life started moving again. He got a job back at the Dairy Queen where he used to work. The owner gave him his old position back as store manager. It felt like maybe, just maybe, things were turning around. But that's when the drinking started. At first, it was just a beer after work. Then it was 3. Then, half a case a day. We should have seen it coming. Chris had a DUI on his record. Alcohol wasn't new to him. But this was different. This was darker. He'd come home slurring his words, yelling at the TV, picking fights over nothing. He never laid a hand on anyone but his words. They cut deep. He'd lash out at my mom, make her feel worthless, say she didn't understand him. And every time Mom would say he's just stressed, the trial's coming up, or work is pushing him too hard. We didn't want to fight her on it. She'd already been through so much. But the truth was obvious. Chris was falling apart and dragging her down with him. This went on for years, until one night something snapped. Chris stumbled in the door drunk, again. But this time, Mom wasn't having it. She stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, face stern. "Have you been drinking?" she asked. He didn't even bother lying. She told him to get out, right then, right there. It was the first time I'd seen her stand that firm in a long time. Chris didn't fight it. He left and went to stay with a friend. The next morning, she called all 3 of us, me, my brother, and my sister, into the living room. "I need your help," she said. "I want his stuff out of the house." Today, we nodded without hesitation. We started boxing up everything: clothes, toiletries, random electronics. We didn't want him stepping foot in that house again. And then came the knock on the front door. I remember it so clearly. It was early afternoon. We were sweaty, frustrated, tired. I opened the door and froze. It was Betty. Betty used to go to high school with me. She also worked with Chris at Dairy Queen. And the look on her face. Something was wrong. She looked at my mom and said, "I need to talk to you, privately." We all sat around the dining table. Betty looked nervous, like she was about to blow up someone's life, and she was. She made my mom promise not to say where the information came from. Then she told us everything. Chris had been cheating with a woman named Darla, a coworker, older, married. Betty had caught them multiple times. At work, in the storage room, in the walk-in freezer. Chris even told Betty that if she ever breathed a word of it to my mom, he'd fire her. And the worst part, Darla was pregnant. My mom didn't scream, she didn't cry, she just sat there, numb. A few minutes passed. Then she stood up and said calmly, "Get the rest of his stuff. Everything. It's going in the alley." We didn't hesitate. Everything Chris owned, every sock, every razor, every scrap of his presents, went out back behind the house. My mom called him and confronted him. He didn't deny it, not once. He actually said he was glad Darla was pregnant because he finally had a child of his own. He said my mom refused to give him that. She hung up and didn't say a word for the rest of the day. We contacted the police and arranged for Chris to pick up his things from the alley with an officer present. He came. He collected. He left. It felt over, like we could breathe again. But it wasn't over. Not yet. My mom wanted to move on. She was done, exhausted. She didn't want revenge, she wanted peace. But me, my brother, and my sister, we weren't ready to let Chris walk away without consequences. He had humiliated our mom. He lied, he cheated. He made her feel like nothing. And we weren't about to let him walk into the sunset with Darla and a new baby, like nothing happened. So we got to work. First, we called his workplace Dairy Queen. Now, DQ is a franchise, so each location is owned by different people. Chris's boss owned several branches in the area, and he actually knew our family pretty well. We explained everything, the cheating, the threats, and most importantly, the sexual acts happening at work. The manager was horrified. He said that wasn't just unprofessional, it was disgusting. Within days, Chris was fired, banned from every DQ that owner operated. And guess who got his job? Betty, the woman he tried to silence. She became the store manager, and let's just say, she ran things a lot better than he ever did. Chris was out of work, out of a home. So he moved in with Darla in a town about an hour away. We thought that would be the end of it, but then we found out he got another job at another Dairy Queen, new town, new boss. Same disgusting behavior, just hidden for now. So we made another call. We told the new owner everything just like before. But this time there wasn't any evidence of current misconduct. It took a while, but eventually they let him go too. Chris was unemployed again, and that's when things took a darker turn. He started driving through our neighborhood. Slowly, repeatedly, we noticed Darla's car parked near our house, sometimes during the day, sometimes late at night. He never came to the door, never said anything, but it felt wrong. Like he was watching us, like he blamed us for everything falling apart. And maybe he did. But here's the thing. Chris still didn't have a valid driver's license. His DUI charges were never cleared. His probation was still active. Legally, he wasn't allowed to drive at all. But here he was, behind the wheel, circling our block. We decided to report it. We called the local police and explained everything. The car, the plates, the fact that a felon was driving under the radar. We asked them to pull the car over the next time they saw it. A few weeks later, they did. They found Chris behind the wheel, intoxicated. Again, he was arrested on the spot. But that wasn't all. The officers searched the house he'd been living in with Darla and found something else. Guns. Multiple. Chris was a felon. He wasn't allowed to possess firearms or even be in a home that had them. That added even more charges. He was locked up again, and by the time his sentence was done, it was just in time for him to be shipped back to Texas. Remember that trial he had agreed to testify in? That never went away. Back he went. Chris was sent back to Texas, straight to federal custody. His cooperation with the FBI didn't make him untouchable, it just bought him time. And while he sat in a cell waiting to testify against his own blood, something major happened. Darla gave birth. To his son. A child Chris had said he always wanted. A child he used to justify cheating on my mother. A child he said would give his life purpose. But something must have shifted for Darla. Maybe it was the reality of raising a newborn alone. Maybe it was watching Chris spiral from afar. Maybe it was just finally seeing him for what he was. Because shortly after giving birth, Darla left him. She cut contact. She stopped taking his calls. She filed for child support. And she moved on. Meanwhile, back in our town, we were trying to rebuild. My mom, though heartbroken, was resilient. She focused on her health, her home, and us. And then the letters started coming. Chris wrote to her from prison, page after page. Some were apologies, some were rants. Some blamed her for everything. It was like watching a man unravel through ink and paper. He begged her to take him back, told her how empty his life felt, how Darla betrayed him, how he never stopped loving her. But my mom, she didn't even read most of them. She burned them, every single one. She told us I let him hurt me once. I'm not giving him the chance to do it again. We respected that. We protected that. Eventually, we moved out of state, found a new home, started over. My mom bought a place with her own savings. We renovated it together, me, my brother, my sister. And then someone new came into her life. Not a criminal, not a liar, just a kind, steady man. Someone who didn't come with chaos or manipulation or broken promises. He made her smile again. Genuinely, like we hadn't seen in years. As for Chris, he eventually got out of prison. From what we've heard, he lives in Kansas now. Broke, bitter, still fighting Darla over child support he can't afford. His son is growing up without him. And from what we've been told, that's for the best. And us, we're good, better than good. My sister's married now. My brother's thriving in a new city. And me. I stayed. I still live with my mom, helping her take care of the home we built from the ashes of the past. Sometimes when we're sitting on the porch drinking coffee and watching the sunset, she'll sigh and say, "I'm so glad I let go." And I know she means it. Because we didn't just survive Chris. We outgrew him. And that's the real ending.